Hello everybody, welcome back to various Oddities Showcase, and I have a bunch to show off today. Now we are once again still rearing towards various Oddities version 5, which is the 5th full release version, and I'm expecting a lot of buzz around that particular one, so I'm trying to make this as good as I can. But currently we are still waiting on a little bit of render code, which I currently have been given a sort of deadline, an estimation of delivery as being this forthcoming Sunday, so hopefully next week I'm just talking about various Oddities version 6 coming up. But for today, I have a number of things to show off. Now the first one is we actually have some game rules. Now, so first one I'm going to talk about is game rule initial caster level. This relates to spells, and basically it defaults to -1. So what that means is that you can actually cast any spell that you happen to find. If we set that to be 0, it would mean nobody can cast any spells whatsoever. But if we set that to values usually between 1 and 20, you can actually start to cast higher and higher tiers of spell. And that functionally is what a particular stat inside of every player is set to when they are initially spawned. So if you set this to be, say, 20, then there's function no difference. If you set it to be 0, anybody that spawns in after that cannot cast any spells. But you can still use the caster command to actually change their caster level, and with that we get the basis of starting up some kind of progression. We still don't have an actual in-game means of progressing your caster level. That will probably be added in the future when I can actually think of a meaningfully reliable way of registering it, measuring it. And the obvious thing to do is just check how many spells you've cast, but that's not necessarily the best way, because you'd need to theoretically just cast a whole bunch of cantrips and stuff and you'd be fine. But the other three, yes indeed, we have 3 other new game rules here. We have corpse loot table, and corpse spawn. Now this might look a little familiar to people who've been watching my videos for a while here. This of course is a mob spawner, and it is now going to be busily working away creating us some mobs, and that will show off exactly what we're talking about. Now, because this is mostly vanilla kind of spawning up here, this is going to be mostly zombies and skeletons, and consequently it's actually going to be a little hard to show off what I'm talking about. But hey, we've been gifted with a creeper first thing. Hooray! Hurrah! So, one of these has spawned what is known as... Whoops. I always get spooked whenever I'm around just falling mobs like that, jeez. But anyways, here these two have spawned corpses. If we right-click on them, we can get a little idea of how they died. And if we shift right-click on them, we can attach to their inventory. So spider hit the ground too hard, and this is 45 slots of inventory, which means that any corpse contains as many slots as your entire inventory, plus all but about 3 of your baubles. So, pretty hefty. However, these only last for 5 minutes. After that, they will die, and their items will be dropped. You can also destroy them early on, especially including in survival mode. Just takes a fair few whacks. And there's a few cases where they don't spawn, so if you die in lava, they don't spawn. If you die by falling into the void, they don't spawn. If you die by disintegration, they don't spawn. But otherwise, the only things that don't make corpses ever are undead, as we can see by the arrows and bones and whatnot falling around us. And players will also do this. They will also create corpses with their inventory, but that part is based purely on the corpse loot value here. If that is set to false, then corpses can still spawn, but they don't just suck up any drops that would be created. Whereas corpse spawn will make mobs drop all of the time, again with the exception of the certain damage types and any mob tagged as being undead in the config file. The additional thing there, though, is the last piece here, corpse loot table, and that basically allows you to add the contents of a loot table to every corpse that spawns, which is useful in cases where you might want to have, say, going into an area and the players have to just kill a certain number of mobs, and you want them to all have like a certain item dropping out of those mobs, so you can just attach that and it will add it to the default contents of the corpse that would normally be here from, say, just the creeper and stuff. Hill. Now, what I have next is a whole ton of blocks. So, first thing I'm going to do is go to game mode 3 here, and zoom my way down into the world. that we have just laid out beneath us. And I think I can just about see one or two examples of what I'm looking for. There we are. So here's our first example. Here we have glowing mushrooms. And these spawn randomly throughout the surface. They only spawn when there is an unobstructed view into the sky. And they do provide... let's just set difficulty to 0 for a quick second. They do provide a little bit of light. It's not very much light, but it's enough to maybe find your way in the darkness, particularly if I had my settings down to moody, which people always complain they can't see anything in, but now we can actually just make our way by the mushrooms. You can't collect them by writ, but you can collect them with Silk Touch enabled. So, hey, there's that. And they just sort of like provide a nice little bit of ambiance. Is there another one over here? Probably. It's a little hard to tell sometimes, especially when I'm on bright, but bleh. So yes, that's the glowing mushrooms. They don't currently have any gameplay function other than just providing a nice little bit of ambiance. And the same is true of the next block that I have to show off, which might be, yep, there we go. So down here, we have some patches of fungus, including some glowing phosphorescent fungus. And again, this doesn't serve any meaningful function right now. You can pick it up if you have Silk Touch, but otherwise it is just destroyed. It's very, very easy to get rid of as well. And I'm probably going to be retexturing this in the very near future, so yeah, there's that. And they do also spread, so they can start to cover areas and such over time. And they just provide a little bit of ambient lighting, a little bit of a guide if you're wandering around underground and such. They also serve to make builds just look a little bit more aesthetic. Heal. But that's all of the blocks that I have to be in a specific world to show you, so over to my usual test world. Okay, now because the fungus actually will be destroyed by bright light, I can't actually show that off in the normal world here. So here we have all of the blocks that I have recently added, and oh boy, there's a bunch. So first things first, these two pots are based on the model for the pots that we've been putting on our heads with the decanter of endless water and the and whatnot. They don't currently have any function, they don't have a crafting recipe. They will in future, but it's not right now. They're just here for aesthetics. Next thing up, we have the sconces, and we have the braziers. As you can see, these come in lit and unlit versions. I did that back to front, but no, don't worry about it. And the brazier is lit very straightforwardly, just by, let's grab a bucket and a flint and steel. You can also use a fire charge if you wanted, and it will also light if there is fire in its vicinity. But we can just extinguish it using a water bucket, or by breaking it and replacing it, of course. And it emits a block update as well as particles and light and such when it is lit or extinguished. So we're just using it to control that little lamp over there. But it does provide full light, and it is quite aesthetic, I think you'll agree. Then over here, we have the sconce. This can be placed on the floor as well as on the wall, and it also can be lit and unlit. In this case, it is lit by placing a torch in it, and you can also unlight it by retrieving the torch. This was by popular demand, so yeah. Whenever it is lit, it emits a signal power of 1 through a comparator, so unlike the brazier, you can draw redstone power from it directly. Pretty nice. And once again, that just serves mostly as ambience, it's mostly aesthetic, but it's a nice mix of looking really aesthetic and also theoretically having a function in actual redstone mechanisms for adventure maps and such. Next, we have these 4 blocks, which are also known as big locks, or blocks, I guess. And as you can see, they come in a variety from stone, iron, gold, and all the way to diamond. And the distinction here is mostly durability. They're about 10 times more durable and blast resistant than their like base material equivalents. Personally, I really like the look of the stone one, so yeah. And the way that these work is that if we place them, they have any orientation they like, but if we place them, and then if we, let's put an adventurer's journal on them. Why not? So lock key set to adventurer's journal. It will now remember that block. These do have a talent here, it is very, very light. And if I try to click it with anything, it will not open in any fashion. But if I click it with the adventurer's journal, it will take the adventurer's journal, it will then click on, and it now emits redstone power. So using this, we can actually create a system that only reacts to one item. This is very much similar to the end portal frame, If you've ever fiddled around with that, then we can in fact check it out. So we have an end portal frame and an eye of ender, and a redstone comparator, because this doesn't actually emit power by itself, but I wanted to make sure this worked just as a door by writ. So, as you can see there, it actually provides power, but there's a problem in that it only accepts ender eyes, which are not necessarily perfect for all adventure maps and such. You also cannot craft it, you can't break it, and you can't get your ender eye back afterwards. So the lock is our solution to that. We can set it to whatever we like, we can craft it in survival mode, and we can place it just happily in there and retrieve it as well. And that allows for fun things like this. So here we have a lock that is bound to a block of emerald, and it is the only way to open this door. Aesthetic AF. Now, it is also worth noting that in addition to the type of item that the lock is set to as its key, it also checks for actual data. So for instance, if I have a lock here and I bind it to this enchanted diamond sword, then if I just grab a regular diamond sword, it doesn't work at all. It's looking for the enchantments, it's looking for all of the NBT data inside of this particular diamond sword. So if you wanted to, you could use this as a lock to get into just your own personal base by using just an item that you're always carrying around. So you perhaps create a lock, you hook that up to a pulse lengthener, and then you just chuck in your diamond sword that you're always carrying around. Maybe it's got a special name, maybe it's got particular enchantments, and then you can open the door, grab your item bag, and just wander through. Of course, this only emits power whilst it's actually got the right item, but hey, that's a thing. I hope you've enjoyed, though, because these are some very interesting features. You can turn off corpses entirely if you like by changing the game rules, by modifying the config a little bit as well. But other than that, you can craft the braziers, you can craft the sconces, you can craft the locks. The only thing here that you can't craft is the pots, the fungi, and the glowing mushrooms, but you can retrieve the latter two. So if you have Silk Touch, you can still make things look nice and aesthetic. And this is all built in the idea of making the crafting of dungeons A, easier, and B, available in survival. So if you wanted to play on a server and be the dungeon maker of your own kind of playthrough, we want to enable that. Just adding a few common dungeon elements that aren't necessarily present in Minecraft by itself. And also, I just want to note, I built this 2x3 door entirely from memory. Totally from scratch. Just to show off this one block. I'm a nerd and I know it. But that is about all that I have to show off today, so I hope you've all enjoyed. And as ever, I shall catch you all next time.